found a study that seems to suggest that AI may be making doctors a little stupider. Or maybe it didn't say that.
And I'm going to be talking about GLP-1s and if the data is true, if they reduce the risk of cancer.
Human beings are not mice. About mice as a Twitter account dedicated to pointing out all the studies that make the news, and all they write is about in mice, in capitals, in mice.
So my take on that is very much, who cares? As we get better at taking care of patients, there are going to be certain skills that go to the wayside.
And I do feel some anger to these companies that are taking advantage of people, and they're selling tremendously expensive tests. It's really those non-validated assays that are promising more than genomic profiling even promises.
It was a study published in JAMA Open Network, and what they found was that the medications that they already knew helped blood sugar, helped weight loss, also reduced the risk of cancer.
I would just ask people to bring those to your physicians before you spend a lot of money.
Hello and welcome back to our show. I'm Dr. Emil Liu, medical oncologist. Today I will be speaking about pharmacogenomics. Can it actually predict whether or not chemotherapy can be successful in cancer before it even is given?
I'm Shruti Patel. I am a medical oncologist in the Bay Area, and I'm going to be talking about GLP-1s and if the data is true, if they reduce the risk of cancer.
And I'm Shalan Beg. I'm a medical oncologist from Dallas, and I found a study that seems to suggest that AI may be making doctors a little stupider. Or maybe it didn't say that.
Possibly. Regardless, we are only oncologists in the building. So welcome, Shruti, welcome, Shalan. This is a great pleasure to be back. We started our show recently, and we've gotten some good traction. So here we are back again. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Can't complain. Living my best life. Ready to talk about...
Midsummer vibes, right?
Yes. It's actually really hot here.
Yeah. Well, why don't you dive in amidst the heat of California? Tell us about your topic and what's going on there.
All right. So essentially, I think it's important to know that the cancers that I'm going to be talking about, we typically call them obesity-associated cancers. But essentially, and I'm just going to pull up the study here. It was a study published in JAMA Open Network in 2024, and they looked at over 1.6 million people with type 2 diabetes. So these patients were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and they looked at patients who were prescribed GLP-1s versus insulin. And what they found was that the medications that they already knew helped blood sugar, helped weight loss, also reduced the risk of cancer. And so they found significant relative risk reductions, which I feel like very important, but had a relative risk reduction of 46% in colorectal cancer, 53% in liver cancer, 48% in ovarian cancer, 59% in pancreatic cancer, and 40% in esophageal cancer. And so what that really means is that people on GLP-1s, compared to those on insulin, were about half as likely to be diagnosed with colorectal cancer compared to those on insulin. And then, you can extrapolate for those other cancers. But I think the most important part of this is that I don't think people should be running out and going to buy GLP-1s, I think there's a company, Her, and there's Noom that's also kind of selling it just as cancer prevention drugs. But I think that the value of the study and why I think people should know about it is that there's benefits in improving your metabolic health. And if you need help with that, which some people do, that you should get it. Right, that's kind of the idea behind the study. Now, of course, it's not randomized and, all the caveats of a retrospective study. But I think that one thing GLP-1s have done in the space is really been able to show that there's other benefits outside of just weight loss, right? There's cardiovascular benefits, which we kind of mostly know about and think about. But sleep apnea was benefited, and now cancer in these 1.6 million person study. And so I just thought it was interesting, right? And further proof that, hey, even if you're not taking a GLP-1, improving your metabolic health is valuable.
Shalan, what's your take on that?
Whenever we do a study from one of these large data sets, and all of us have been involved in these cancer registry SEER or NCDB studies, I've always felt that people who are getting a specific intervention already self-select as a better, with better phenotype, with better characteristics, with better outcomes. I've never seen, I shouldn't say never, I don't really often see studies that show that exposure to an intervention was associated with poor outcome in these registries. So there's something inherent about studies that are looking in retrospectively at people who received an extra treatment. Maybe those people were different to begin with, they were more engaged, they had different socioeconomic factors, different comorbidities, different level of management just as a factor of being on that treatment to begin with. Having said that, it's really encouraging to see that consistency, and why I'm excited about this data is that it is consistent with what we think the mechanism of a lot of these cancers are going to be as well. Some of the cancers that you suggested are quote-unquote obesity-related cancers or lifestyle-related cancers, obesity being a disease and lifestyle being a separate risk factor. So to see that there could be modulation with a medication that has improved metabolic outcomes, has improved weight outcomes, and it's already impacting cancer is very encouraging. I think for our listeners, you mentioned that these are relative risks. Now we see in the lay press, people report relative risk quite a bit. So if somebody's risk goes from 10 to 9, that's just a 1% reduction. That's a 10% relative risk reduction. So when we think about what the proportions that you already discussed are, that the magnitude is fairly small in the grand scheme of things when it comes to an individual making a decision for their treatment.
Well said. I think with this, in terms of our listeners and educating, absolute risk reduction and all these relative risk reduction, the epidemiology of it is really crucial to understand. So where do we even start with these GLP agonists? I have no doubt, Shruti, this is going to be a study. This is one of those that people will have in hand or maybe scroll on their phone and ask about it, like, should I be on it? I've had questions just with the rise of GLP agonists in the last few years, mainly focusing on safety. Is it safe for me to be on it? I'm on it already, or I've been in discussion with somebody about prescribing it. Now that I have a cancer diagnosis, can I do this or not? 1.6 million is very impressive. You don't usually get, but again, it's a database, and as Shalon said, retrospective. There are a lot of caveats, but it's definitely a topic that we're going to have to address, like it or not. And I think also we're still relatively in the dawn of this class of drugs, and so some of the longer term complications and side effects, as you mentioned about cardiovascular potential benefits with weight loss. The flip side of it is there are studies now emerging about potential cardiovascular complications and other risks. So these are all things to keep in mind. Just for context, we know that diabetes and obesity are risk factors for cancer. It's an inflammatory state. And so people who get insulin, we have to presume we're patients with diabetes, but not everybody who's getting the GLP agonist has diabetes. There are different populations involved. So we have to take all those things into consideration. Well done. Shalon, tell us about AI. It is in the slipstream and in the zeitgeist of society. Are we losing IQ points as we speak, even talking about it?
Very, very interesting study came out in the Lancet. The title is Endoscopist Deskilling Risk After Exposure to Artificial Intelligence in Colonoscopy. So it's a multi-center observational study from 4 endoscopy centers in Poland. What they did, and it's a retrospective study, so they went back to see what the quality of colonoscopies were in people before and after those physicians were exposed to an artificial intelligence assisted mechanism of doing colonoscopies. One of the most common outcomes, the main reason a lot of us get screening colonoscopies is so that we can find polyps, because we know that in 8 to 15, 20 years, there is a very high chance for a polyp to then become a cancer. And when we do a colonoscopy, we're able to identify the polyp and even remove the polyp at that same time. So an adenoma, a polyp detection rate, or an adenoma polyp detection rate, is a quality metric which measures how good a gastroenterologist is and what their yield is for adenomas. Now, generally it varies from one person to the other, but once they do hundreds or they do thousands at a time, you can think about a standard adenoma detection rate as being appropriate, and you can compare them across different populations. So in this study, they went back to see what the adenoma detection rate of these colonoscopists from 4 centers in Poland was before they started using AI tools, And then after AI tools, they wanted to see what their detection rate was without using the tool. So they were exposed to the AI tool. They looked at their adenoma detection rate before and after, and both of these cohorts, they were not using the AI skill. So they were using it with their native endoscopist skills. And what they found is that the adenoma detection rate went down after those colonoscopists or those physicians had been exposed to AI. So the authors raised the question on whether in the world where physicians are or clinicians are going to be continuously exposed to AI over long periods of time, over months, years, decades of their career, is that going to lead to deskilling of the capabilities that they have spent a lot of times developing to begin with? Now, are those skills that maybe are redundant? Are those skills that need to be maintained? Is it a good thing that that skill is going away and there's another better process, or is there something that we should save? So lots of interesting conversations and points that are coming out for this study. And I want to throw this out to the group to see what your thoughts are. And is the deskilling a real phenomenon? And if it is it always bad?
Shruti, take it on.
So my take on that is very much, who cares? And I say that very jokingly. Obviously we all care and we want to be skilled and all of that. But in the same way that while you were talking, I was just thinking about what happened when stethoscopes were invented. I don't even know when that was, but it was probably a while ago. And I'm sure before stethoscopes were invented, doctors did things a certain way, and they probably were able to figure out maybe that someone had a heart problem based on lower extremity edema, maybe, or they feel the pulse and there's atrial fibrillation or at least an abnormal heart rhythm. But my point is that this is medicine, right? As we get better at taking care of patients, there are going to be certain skills that go to the wayside. And I kind of feel like there is no dearth of things that we need doctors to do, whether it's research, whether it's if your AI makes you a better polyp detector, and AI polyp detecting is improving outcomes. Yes, of course, over-reliance on AI, and this isn't really talking about over-reliance on AI and that robots are going to take over the world. That's not really, I realize that that's a concern, and that's not really what I'm talking about. But I think, I guess I just think that if we're getting better at taking care of patients, detecting polyps, and yes, there will be times, I think the concern that I imagine is that what if the AI shuts down, right? Or there's no Wi-Fi, or there's something, right? But the reality is that people practice in different resourced locations every day, today, all over the world, right? So to be worried about a time when maybe we won't have access to Wi-Fi, I guess my first gut instinct to that is, if we're getting better at doing something, we should just continue to get better at do something. Now, do people always have stethoscopes? No, they don't. And they still are able to take care of patients, right? In the same way that yes, but it'll be better with the stethoscope, of course. And so, yeah, that's my take. That's the take I got.
I couldn't help but think or imagine when Sean was describing of the colonoscopists. They were doing the colonoscopy with one hand, and then the other hand they were scrolling through their phone on something. I'm like, well, yeah, you're going to miss a lot of things. But I also think of the history of colonoscopy and how they've improved upon detection of polyps. I think of withdrawal time. This has been around for decades, where there's a certain amount of time below which you are going to miss polyps, but above which you'll be more likely. So withdrawal time, for the folks out there, is when a colonoscopist inserts, a gastroenterologist who is certified to do that, puts in the colonoscopy device. Of course, they're looking with the camera, but the withdrawal time is when they're coming it out. So they don't just zip it out, but they're going, I think, if I believe from residency, the cutoff was 10 minutes. Maybe it's different now, but enough time to really slowly and deliberately be looking with the human eyes towards the walls of the colon to make sure they don't miss adenomas. What I picture where AI really could be of most use, there are increasing amount of studies of deep learning methodology and AI looking at scans, and if you can believe it, looking at scans that are we think even CT scans that aren't even the highest resolution form of imaging, but to be able to pick out vessels and the the morphology of blood vessels and to correlate that with prognosis and potential diagnosis of something that could be newly diagnosed like a tumor. And it's just utterly fascinating. It's more sophisticated in histopathology, but I can imagine a time in a very short-term future where AI could be hopefully not dumbing us down, but helping us, or maybe GI doctors, detect adenomas or really high-risk adenomas that could be tumors or otherwise. So um, a very interesting study. I don't know how they came up with that in the first place, but AI is so central. So any angle that people can find,
Yeah, I mean,
I
when
guess
we
bring it
started
on.
getting ultrasounds and CT scans, and those became very easy, it did kind of destroy the physical exam and the utility of the physical exam in the physician's encounter. To Shruti, to your point, and I agree. I think if this is going to make overall health better, improve access, you can do more colonoscopies at that time, so more folks can get access to the procedure and overall lead to better outcomes. I think overall I'm less worried about people losing specific skills with time. But I think we should keep an eye on it because there could be some times where we wish that where that wasn't the case. So
Efficiencies and turnaround time would be music to the ears of any health executive also trying to bring in more revenue. So, but I think just to round out the point, Shruti, on what you said, I think of having trained in neuro-oncology, which is a different story altogether, but the lost art of the neuro exam in the era of brain MRIs 50, 60 years ago, you completely differentially were absolutely depended on a superb neurologic exam to focalize a potential brain tumor or a known brain tumor. No need for that brain MRIs. I'm sure every neurology colleague listening to this, if they bother to do so, will completely disagree, and that is fine. Stirring the pot a little bit. So I wanted to bring to the table just a consideration. Kind of, we are in the era of circulating tumor DNA, the so-called liquid biopsy, and blood isn't the only type of liquid. It could be urine too, feces maybe even perhaps as well. We are fully in the era of comprehensive genomic profiling. We are trying to gather information to help as much as possible to tailor an individual patient's treatment once they're diagnosed with cancer or further along in their treatment plan. But at the end, do we have tools, yes or no, that can predict with absolute certainty for an individual patient whether a therapy will work? And I describe to patients who are either newly diagnosed, second, 10th opinions or whatever, that there is no way with certainty until the passage of time. And then we will determine whether or not. And we can all quote, and I'm sure you would say the same, and all of our colleagues would say the same. We quote from studies that quote averages, right? So whether it's 1.6 million patients in some kind of studies, but more realistically in prospective clinical trials, a couple of hundred patients had the study intervention versus a couple of hundred standard of care. We are quoting the law of averages. And how this came to my attention most recently is a patient brought to my attention personalized genomic testing. It's under the domain of pharmacogenomics. And it's not a new field, of course. And it goes back a couple of decades, and lung cancer comes to mind, where in a bygone era before it was fully molecularly targeted, and we were aware of EGFR and everything beyond that. But there were tests like ERCC1. I don't know if anyone even quotes ERCC1 as a excision repair complementation protein that vantada platinum may not be as efficacious in that type of cancer. And there were tests and there were trials to look at those tests, and they never really took off, and I think with good reason. But such tests are out there. They're checking circulating tumor cells. I won't quote the exact company that was brought to my attention, but the bottom line is I think what's being shopped and marketed to patients are tremendously expensive tests that vary, and they are thousands upon thousands of dollars out of pocket, not covered by insurance. They're rightly not covered by insurance because there are no prospective data to prove that they even work. But yet the marketing is so powerful, whether within North America or outside North America, that people are made to believe that these tests will, with great certainty, if not 100% certainty, predict for my type of cancer, my cancer type, and in my body that this will work. So I very much welcome your perspectives on this because it's something very real in that people are being told. I would say also, up for debate in this case, to tread somewhat lightly, it was not a allopathic or osteopathic physician that recommended to this individual to get it, and at great expense, getting results. But I also know that any treating oncologist, in this case me, I will be provided these results and being told, what do you think about it and what are you going to do with these results? Shalon, let's start with you.
look, precision medicine has come such a long way. 10, 15 years ago, what we were doing is putting cancer cells in a petri dish and exposing it to different chemotherapy medications and see if that individual's cancer responds or not. We know that those tests didn't really pick up. But as we started to go into DNA analysis, RNA, next-gen sequencing, whole genome sequencing, and the development of other precision medicine treatments, we are seeing a revolution in how people with non-small cell lung cancer, with BRAF mutated colon cancer, with MSI, with TRK fusions and RET fusions, how well they are doing. What my worry is that these non-validated techniques end up muddying the water for the approved mechanisms that we have to help characterize somebody's cancer that have specific treatments associated with it. Now, you shared in your group chat some of the in our group chat some of the information that you were seeing, and that panel was going to test or had an opportunity to test someone's cancer with garlic and see whether a garlic diet, I guess, would have impacted the patient's treatment or not. And I can see why somebody who has cancer would be interested in getting this type of a test. So I think it's very hard for someone who is looking for options and looking for ideas and doesn't want to leave any stone unturned to not ask and to understand what the different tools are available to us. I think we are going to have more people come to us in clinic, bring those. I would just ask people to bring those to your physicians before you spend a lot of money getting those tests, because some of those are completely revolutionary and are very important to understand the characteristics of a tumor, but a lot of other ones are not.
Yes, Shruti.
Yeah, I mean, I completely, I agree, but I get it. I get why someone would, I think a lot of the information online, why it spreads like wildfire, is that it makes a lot of sense, right? There's point A to point B to point C to point D, and so A goes to D, right? Like that there's a very clear, and science, unfortunately, is messy, and I would say cancer biology is even messier. And there is no, AB, there's like no, and so I think it truly frustrates me, if I'm being honest, because it's zero the patient's fault, in my opinion, for going to get these tests and then bringing them to us, because that makes a ton of sense to me. And I think obviously a lot of our job is to educate, but also I would expect the people producing this test also to take some like degree of responsibility, because I feel like it makes a ton of sense. And if I was in that situation and there was a test that said, I'm going to test all these different things and find out what kills your cancer. It's the same reason why mice studies have now taken over the internet, right? Where before it was like the critique of wellness entrepreneurs, I will call them. The critique was, you don't have science, you don't have studies. So now they're bringing mice studies and they're saying 85 to 90% of our DNA is the same. Why can't it work? And yeah, that sounds good to me. Like, right? Like I get why people see that. And so, if you say like, we're going to put your tumor and we're going to check these things on your cells, I get why it makes sense. And, I find it very, I wish science was easier to understand. I wish science made, a lot more sense, and that what worked in mice did work in people. Of course I wish that, but there are countless studies from preclinical to phase 1, way more often than not that things don't work. We know that. I'm in phase 1. I know that. And I wish that was not true. But yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts on that.
So when it comes to these, when it comes to these panels, and if you're somebody whose loved one has cancer, or you're looking for yourself or a neighbor, a family member, what do you look for as physicians who are caring for people? What do you look for when someone says, here is a new assay, a new panel, tell me what you think about it? I'd like to hear your algorithm. For me, I go to the website, I go to the About Us tab, and I see who's backing the the company, who are the founders, who are the advisory boards. That's not always helpful. Sometimes they don't have any, but that's one thing. That's the bare minimum that I do, and I made that a habit. I'm curious, Emil, what's your process?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did when I got the information. I mean, the first thing I say to the patient is, well, first of all, thank you for sharing with me because there are a fair number of instances where people might be afraid to share with their oncologist. They might feel like they're going to get demeaned or really put down by it. So I feel grateful that they're willing to confide to me or explain this to me. And I'll say, well, we'll deal with the results together if you ask me about it when the time comes. So I always go about me because I want to know who's behind this. I want to know disclosures and conflicts of interest. And then I also look for the word clinical trials or evaluated nowhere for the data science. And in this particular case, this company, which is not based in North America, actually had data, evidence, or something to that evidence of the tab. And it was abstracts. And just for everyone to know that even the best possible gold standards are peer-reviewed manuscripts that go through rigmarole. And I will say, whether it's New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, all the highest impact journals, the glory ones that make the news, just because it's in those journals doesn't mean that the clinical trial is right or the conclusions are right. It's just they've gone through peer review, which is the best we have, and abstracts have a much lesser degree or a whole lot less than peer-reviewed manuscripts. So I think it's something to keep in mind. It's just a bunch of abstracts listed, at various conferences. I think even ASCO included. But I think just being able to go through, when I talk about whether you call it holistic medicine, acupuncture, herbal medications or whatever, I always tell people a few things. I would say for drugs or any medications you get over the counter or otherwise, or from a holistic practitioner, if they're not prescribed then or not FDA approved, then you don't know whether they stimulate cancer, one. You don't know whether they interfere with what we consider standard of care chemotherapy or targeted drugs or immunotherapy or otherwise. And you don't know exactly what's in it. So, jokingly or not, you just like crack buy it from the street. You don't know what content is it pure or not. You don't go know in GNC or any other things you get elsewhere, Amazon or otherwise, to what extent there are impurities. Not guessing that there might be, there are. And so I always point them towards a couple of websites. The National Cancer Institute has an excellent one about herbs, and then Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center has a website and an app called About Herbs. And I point to there and I'll say there's long lists in alphabetical order with the evidence to date, and every last one of them is in vitro. None of them is in a randomized controlled trial, which is our standard in medicine and clinical oncology to show if you take this, garlic, shiitake mushrooms, or otherwise, and take this versus comparison to like people who did not take it, that there is superiority. And I would say, exactly as you said, just with cautious optimism, if you want to have the optimism part, but just looking objectively. I know it's a much harder conversation to have. It's much easier for someone to say, I've got something I know you want, which is information that will help potentially cure you. And that's exactly what many people want to hear. And I have to, we have to have sympathy and empathy for that plight because there's emotion of it, right? And we come at it as best we can with the objective. And it's so much harder of a conversation to have. And I do feel some anger to these companies that are taking advantage of people, and they know it, and they're selling things. So truth in marketing is essential. And just to round out, I would just emphasize to everyone listening, we're not talking in this case, or I'm not bringing up comprehensive genomic profiling from validated assays, BRAFs or colorectal cancer, EGFRs. That's not even close to what we're talking about. It's really those non-validated assays that are promising more than genomic profiling even promises. And that therein lies the danger of modern oncology.
Basically, just to answer your question, I basically do the same thing, and I also try to figure out what their assay is. I actually think it's a bit of a red flag when I cannot figure out what exactly is their assay, right? Like if it's a validated one or one that's not even validated, but they're like, we do sequencing, and then we look at, if it's very clear what they're trying to do, I think that's different. But if there's no information on actually what is being done in the lab or whatever, to me, that's a bit of a red flag.
Lots of hand waving. It makes me recall there's a Twitter account when you said Shruti about mice. There's a Twitter account dedicated to pointing out all the studies that make the news, and all they retweet it. All they write is about in mice in capitals, in mice, and that's like the entire handle. And I love it because it calls attention that these not even in human beings, not even smaller human being clinical trials in mice. And there's a long way to go. As I don't know, genetically, it's always cited that human beings and orangutans and other animal mammals are like 3% apart. 97% versus 100%, but we're a far cry from mice. Human beings are not mice. Human beings are different types of mammals. And so I think with that, we'll conclude this episode of our show, Only Oncologists in the Building. It's been a great pleasure. Um, Thank you so much for joining. We hope you continue to join us throughout. Please log on to our YouTube. Please subscribe. Smash that subscribe button, as someone told us on social media in great enthusiasm. I see you, Christiana. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for joining us. We will see you online and every next episode.